Is your business making physical products and you want to make sure your workspace is set up for maximum productivity? In this video, I'm going to share my complete checklist you can use to audit and improve your manual workspace without adding automation or changing your products. Whether you're a handmade business with only a single workstation or a factory with lots of interconnected workstations, the basic principles are the same and can help you increase your productivity and improve the quality of your products. I have used these principles both as a production engineer on my own lines and as a McKinsey consultant in over a dozen factories, and in many cases doubled the productivity of the people working in the line just by changing the layout. I know it sounds trivial, but the way you set up your workspace has a huge impact. So here's my complete checklist to help you achieve the best workspace setup for your production. And by the way, I'm gonna include a summary of the checklist towards the end of the video, so you don't have to take notes. Let's dive in. First things first, before we can really optimize the workspace, we need to have an idea of what tasks are even performed at the station. And those tasks need to be standardized. This is often referred to as standard work. So we want to make sure that there are standardized process steps that are done in a standard order and that these steps are written down somewhere. When I went to different factories, I usually asked the people to explain to me everything that needed to be done at this station, but then I also asked to be able to just observe them doing the work, because sometimes there are some differences between the official procedure and how it's actually done. Sometimes for good reasons, but we want to optimize reality and not some theoretical process, right? Okay, so once we have a standardized process in place, we know all the essential steps. Now we can focus on eliminating or at least reducing different types of waste. Well, what kind of waste am I talking about? I'm basing this on lean manufacturing, which is a production methodology from Japan. And according to lean manufacturing, there are 8 types of waste that should be avoided, and I've picked 5 types that I think can be reduced through the way you set up your workspace. That's just for background. Let's go through them. The first type of waste I want to look at is excess processing. Is there any step that could be left out? Anything that doesn't add value for the customer, or even a step that is done twice for no reason. This happens more often than you think. For example, a production line I went to had 2 people standing at the end of the line who were both checking the quality of the parts, and they were repeating a lot of the same checks. So you had one person checking, I don't know, that the tape was placed, and then the next person checked that again. It wasn't the only check they were doing, but some of the checks were doubled because this just kind of creeped into the process. So you want to check and question your procedures regularly, which I'm very happy to do for you, by the way. The next type of waste you want to try to get rid of is transport. Moving your products around doesn't add value to them. So it's a waste of your time, but we often don't notice it, especially not how much we walk around. So one thing I actually do when I visit a production line is I pick a worker and I just observe them for half an hour or so. And I sketch on a paper all the path that they walked during that time, which we call a spaghetti diagram, because in many cases it ends up looking like I'm drawing a bunch of spaghetti, even though usually the worker is supposed to be stationary at the line. And that's a sign that the layout is not optimized, that they don't have everything they need to get the work done, or critical things are positioned far away, or the work is distributed in a weird way. At one factory I went to, whenever there was a specific defect produced in the line, the worker would leave his station, walk 5 minutes to the lab to drop off the part, and then walk back 5 minutes. So his station was standing still for 10 minutes, and the products were piling up, and it was holding up the whole line. And no one had ever done the math of how much this was costing by holding up production, and figured that there should perhaps be an alternative process. So to eliminate transport, you want to look at the order of process steps and try to get the layout to match that order as much as possible. So you're not walking back and forth. You want to look at the distance between stations. Can you just move everything closer together? And don't forget the location of raw materials, finished goods, defective products, and tools. And you want to check the overall shape. A lot of production lines are placed in a line, which is fine if everyone stays in one place. But if you have people covering several stations, it can be better to set up the line in a circle or in a U shape. Because if it's just one person, they can just walk in a circle. So they never have to walk back to the beginning of the line because they end up there automatically. And if it's several people, they can cover stations on both sides of the line instead of just one, which also saves walking distances. The next type of waste is motion. Similar to transport, just moving your hands around or bending over does not add value to the customer, and it wastes time. And so here you want to look at the exact position and distance of all the elements of your workstation. So raw materials, tools, finished parts, work in progress parts, and the working surface. In general, you want these to be at easily reachable heights and distances, with the most frequently used tools and parts closer by and the less frequently used further away. And you want to avoid precision tasks as much as possible, which happens typically when putting things back. For example, if you need to mark your product and then put back the pen, putting back the pen often takes longer than the task itself. So you can replace the cap with a funnel-shaped container that you can just throw it into. And for tools, these can often be suspended with a spring. So you can just pull it down to use it and do the task, and then let go of it, and it jumps back to its storage position. For finished parts, try to have a storage solution where you can easily place these parts without damaging them and where they don't end up in your space. For work in progress parts, ideally you never want to set them down if you can avoid it, and if you have to, it should be as easy and quick as possible. And even for the working surface, I often see surfaces that are way too small or even blocked by tools, raw materials, or finished parts, or in an extreme case, decor, which again leads to unnecessary precision work because you need to navigate this restricted area. Give yourself enough space for the whole task and tape it off so you're not even tempted to put anything else there. To really eliminate motion waste, I recommend doing a time and motion study where you analyze all the individual motions you do at the station and how long each motion takes, and then you try to reduce each of them as much as possible. The next type of waste we want to avoid is waiting. Either waiting of the worker, waiting of the machine, or waiting of the product. And especially waiting at the bottleneck, whatever that is at your station. I'm planning a whole video on how to find and fix the bottleneck, but at a semi-manual workstation, the bottleneck is often a machine that takes longer than all the manual tasks that are done during that time. For example, an oven or a heat press or something else. So it's very important that we avoid letting that machine wait, meaning we want to reorganize the tasks in a way where the machine is always busy. And the time where the machine is waiting while we're taking a finished product out of the machine and then putting the next one into it is as short as possible. Here again, a time and motion study of all the tasks and times will help to figure out the optimal order of tasks and layout of the workstation to avoid unnecessary waiting. The final type of waste we want to avoid in a workspace are defects. Again, I'm planning a dedicated video on how to reduce defects, but there are sometimes ways you can do this just through your workspace design. One requirement so that you can actually do this is that you're actually documenting defects whenever they happen and figuring out the root cause of the defect. And oftentimes you can prevent those defects by design, which is a concept known as pokayoke, making things foolproof. For example, if your products often get damaged because they fall off the working surface, perhaps you can add a ledge to prevent that. Or if you often confuse two similar looking parts with each other, perhaps you can color code them so that this doesn't happen anymore. You want to try to find a simple solution that resolves the root cause of the mistake. These are the types of waste I would look at in a workstation. Now, I would like to introduce you to two more lenses you can apply to your workstation to make it the most efficient. The first lens is ergonomics. And I think there's a misconception where it's considered optional or a good deed. No, ergonomic equals efficient. The definition of ergonomic is designed for efficiency and comfort in the working environment. So, what do you need to think about when it comes to ergonomics? The main concerns are force application, awkward posture, repetitive tasks, and doing anything for extended periods of time. So the more of these you have combined, the worse for your comfort and productivity. Okay, so how do you prevent these? For force application, you want to avoid having to lift weights by using some sort of support, whether that's a rolling cart, a crane, or something else. And if you have to lift weights, you want to do that close to your body where it's easier rather than further away. Awkward posture is anything where your back is bent, your neck is not upright, your elbows are either overextended or really bent. And these things you can usually prevent by having a height adjustable work surface and by placing things in a position you can reach naturally. Not too high, not too low, no bending over required. Obviously, it's difficult to get this perfect for all tasks, but the better this is, especially for frequent tasks, the more efficient and comfortable it is. When it comes to repetitive tasks, they can reduce attention, cause boredom, and even long-term physical injuries and mental health problems. To reduce repetitive tasks, you want to avoid batching one task. There are actually a lot more reasons why batching is bad for your production, which I made an entire video on, but it also strains you because you're doing the same thing over and over and over rather than doing a chain of tasks. And if you can't avoid repetitive tasks, you should rotate between different stations regularly. But this is a band-aid solution, not an ideal one. And to avoid doing anything for extended periods of time, again, rotation helps, but you also want to avoid, for example, having to hold something in place, apply force, or bend over for a long time, which you avoid by having equipment do this for you where possible, like a clamping table to hold things in place, or again, height adjustable work surfaces. And there's actually two more points I want to talk about when it comes to ergonomics, and that's noise and lighting. Noise can cause stress and reduce productivity, interfere with communication and concentration. There are different regulations by country. In Sweden, where I was working in a factory, I think the maximum noise level allowed was 75 decibel. In many countries, it's 85 decibel. But, somewhere around those values is too much noise. You can measure this with your phone by downloading a decibel meter app, and you should measure at the location where the person is working. So not right at the machine and also not far away from it. And if the noise level is too high, you can either create further distance or isolation between the source of noise and the worker, or you can use ear protection, like for example, earplugs. But they need to be inserted correctly and have a sufficient rating. I have these earplugs that can reduce noise by 35 decibel, but you have some that are rated for only 10 or 15 decibel. So if you have a working environment of 100 decibel, that's not going to cut it. And now on to lighting. Lighting is important so you can see what you're doing and avoid accidents. I've seen some dark factories, and they also all happen to have a problem with frequent work injuries. So a couple of pointers on lighting. You want to make sure the entire working area is lit up and that no shadows are hiding anything important like potential dangers, things you can trip over, run into, or cut yourself on. You want to light up the work surface, but don't shine into your eyes. And the light should have a neutral color temperature and the right brightness, not too dark, not too bright. And if you find anyone doing this, maybe just add an extra light, perhaps even a magnifier. Just give yourself the best conditions to see what you're doing. Okay, so these are the main aspects of ergonomics to consider. And you can actually just Google ergonomic risk assessment and the name of your country, and you should find a checklist issued by a government agency to help you assess your workplace's ergonomics. But you can already achieve a lot just by using common sense and thinking about the factors that I mentioned. So, ergonomics is one lens you can apply to your workspace. But there's another lens I want to introduce you to that will help you, especially if you're using your workspace for a lot of different tasks or you feel a bit overwhelmed and like you don't know where to start. And this approach is called 5S. This is a simple framework for workplace organization that was developed in Japan to make the workplace more safe, efficient, and stress-free to work at. And it has 5 steps: sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. Basically, it's a fancy way to say declutter, tidy up, clean, create a system, and make it a habit. It's like KonMari for factories, but let's go through the steps. So first, you sort your workspace by removing unnecessary items. Declutter. Evaluate every tool, part, or material in the workstation and ask, do we use this daily, weekly, never? The goal is to only keep essential items and store less used items nearby but out of the immediate workspace. Remove or discard the rest. For example, if you have 3 pairs of scissors in reach, keep only your favorite pair at the station and put the other ones in a different location. Okay. Next, you want to set your workplace in order. Tidy up with the motto, a place for everything and everything in its place. Make it as easy as possible to find and return your tools and materials. Some great options are shadow boards or foam inserts in your drawers in the shape of the tools so that it's immediately clear which tool belongs where and which tools are missing that should be there. You can also use labeled bins or color coding, and you want to arrange items in the sequence that they will be used. Now, you might have noticed that there is some overlap between 5S and the strategies we talked about earlier, but I think it can help to come at the same problem from different perspectives. Next up, we have shine. Yeah, they're really stretching the names to fit the 5S because the original 5S are Japanese words that start with S, so they had to get a little creative in translating them. So they ended up with shine, which I would just call clean. You want to clean and inspect the workstation daily or between shifts. As you clean, you also want to look for any wear and tear or potential hazards so that you can prevent breakdowns, keep the workplace safe, and create a nice working environment. Step number 4 is to standardize, create a system. You want to establish routines that maintain the order you just created. This can be developing checklists, diagrams, or work instructions to maintain the first 3 steps and training employees to follow them. A great option can be to take a photo of the cleaned up workspace and put it up at the station so it's easy to see when something is out of place. And the final step is to sustain. Build habits to keep the system going. For example, you can have regular audits and weekly check-ins with the team to address any challenges or propose tweaks to consistently improve the system. You want this to become part of the working culture. And I think having a framework can help to make it feel less like your parents telling you to tidy up and more like an official work standard. At the factory where I worked, it almost was a bit of a running joke. Like if our department manager came into a room and saw that we had our gear spread out everywhere, he'd be like, "Come on, people, 5S." And then everyone would clean up a bit. I'm not saying this is great. Ideally, you don't have to say anything because the whole work environment encourages it and makes it super easy to follow. But at least awareness is the first step to getting there. I actually gave this office a makeover recently, and before that, I had been struggling with random papers piling up on my desk and chargers laying around. Great example right now. And I realized that is because they don't have a place where I can put them away and retrieve them very quickly. So I finally set up a system. I bought a folder and transparent envelopes so I can easily put away any papers, even if I cannot punch holes into them because they're official documents or something. And I dedicated a drawer to charters and organized it with some old paper boxes. It's been over a month since I implemented that, and I haven't had any problems with this again without really thinking about it. And it's really nice to have a clean desk every day without putting any effort into it. That's the power of using all of these strategies. You can create a workstation that feels effortless to use, where everything has a place and work flows smoothly. As promised, here is the full checklist for you to take a screenshot. Let me know in the comments which point is the biggest problem in your workspace right now. Now, one thing you might be tempted to do in your workspace to improve efficiency is to make your products in batches. However, that's often the worst thing you could do. And I made a video explaining the reasons why, so feel free to check that out right here. See you next time. Okay, bye.